Not on slideshow view yet, but hello. I will hang on a moment while we let people join from the waiting room. So we will kick off in just a few moments. Okay, I will get us going. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Bringing the World to Liverpool. And for those joining around the world, good morning or good evening. I'm Mark Horn, Head of Philanthropy at the University of Liverpool, and I'm delighted to say that today we are joined by Carol Rose Burke, CBE. Carol graduated from the university with an MSc in Advanced Manufacturing Systems and Technology in 1990, and she's the Managing Director of Unipart Manufacturing Group, a British multinational logistics, supply chain, manufacturing and consultancy company. She's one of the UK's leading advocates for manufacturing and engineering, and she's responsible for UMG's manufacturing partner strategy, created to support the shift away from the internal combustion engine and alternative forms of propulsion. Please do ask any questions you have for Carol in the chat, as I will hand over after our conversation to my colleague Andy Harrison, who will be reading all of your questions and posing them to Carol. And programming note, please do keep your mics on mute to avoid audio interference, and you may find it helpful to have the speaker view on. So I will, without any further ado, move to say hello to Carol if I can. So welcome, Carol.
Hi, Mark. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled that you could. If you'd like to introduce yourself, if you can.
Certainly. Carol Rose Burke, Managing Director of Unipart Manufacturing Group, which is one of 4 large divisions. Mark started to talk a little bit about Unipart, the Unipart group of companies. Turnover, for those of you who are interested in data, I guess there might be a few of you that are, is about £1 billion. So we employ 12,500 people all around the world. Although we talk about ourselves as a UK-centric business, we do have something like 74 sites globally. And I started my career as a sponsored engineering student. I'm not sure whether those things exist any longer. Perhaps similar to an apprenticeship, but quite different in the sense that we still, you applied to university in the usual way, and then you sought sponsorship for your degree as an engineer, which meant that we were occasionally the more wealthy of students, in the sense that we received a bursary. But much more important than that, we had an organised process of vacation work, which I'll come back to later in my talk. But the idea of creating industry-ready graduates goes right to the heart, and it was probably formed in my early years, the value of industrial experience. So that was with British Steel Corporation. Then I joined GKN, which is a FTSE 100 company. It's been through a few changes, in ownership, and one of the themes for all of our lives now is change, and then ultimately the Unipart Group.
Certainly, and you're right. Those kind of schemes aren't quite as common these days as they used to be. We still do have our year in industry programs, and obviously, as I would point out, that actually our engineering graduates are enormously employable, and so we do focus very much on that in school. So you studied engineering, Liverpool, but why did you choose what you studied, and why did you choose Liverpool?
Yeah, that it's been fantastic just to reflect on that so many years after being with you. So my degree was actually, my first degree, Bachelor of Engineering, was actually in mechanical engineering with management, which I think you still offer as a sort of as an MEng. But what attracted me to that is that I didn't, and please take this the right way, I didn't really want to be an engineer. I wanted for wanted to study engineering in as much detail as possible, and I wanted engineering to be at the center of what I did. But actually, what I really wanted to do was bring together commodities, people, technology, capital, and be a leader. And actually, Liverpool offered that type of degree, and I think still does, that in effect gives you a fully accredited degree with all the academic element that you want, but it also gave broad insights and moved into those more sort of economic and business leadership roles, which I think is so important for engineering today. The siloed world that in some respects I think I was part of 30 years ago was changing then, but it's absolutely not the case now. So I was very much attracted specifically by the course, and I think a very leading edge approach to what I'm talking about. But the city also attracted me. I mean, this was an edgy city. I was a daughter of the Margaret Thatcher years, dare I say, and Derek Hatton was the deputy leader of the council, and it was all happening in Liverpool. So that juxtaposition of actually, I think, quite a traditional approach to at the time. I'm not sure now, but certainly Liverpool, it was one of the founding members of the Russell Group. It was a university that stood out in this troubled city. And I know now when I visit now, it's such a different place. But to be there in those formative years, I have to admit, attracted me. There were a few other things as well, the nightlife, all the things that us students, which is nice for me to remember doing that. There's the sitting room nightclubs, which was really sort of private members I won't say anything too more about that, but it was.
Oh no, feel free, it's okay.
Patrick Minford, Mrs. Thatcher's advisor, was at the university at the time. So Liverpool is always at the front of everything, and that's what I really enjoyed. It doesn't always do things conventionally. And that the university sat within that was a fantastic attraction, really very much so, Mark.
Okay, good. Well, yeah, we still find obviously place a lot of importance on how we relate to the city. I was almost going to ask whether you ever went to the Raz or the Blue Angel.
The answer to that is definitely yes.
Yes. So, no, it's the makeup of the university faculty, especially in the 1980s and into the early 90s, is interesting because obviously sort of a city that leaned very one way politically, perhaps you had some faculty who leaned very much the other way, and it was an interesting contrast.
Very much so.
I mean, what was you covered this a little bit already, but what was the best thing about, I suppose, the course and the studying at Liverpool?
I think it was that juxtaposition and the fact that there was very much an intent to be academic, but also then to stretch the thinking process. There was no silo on the aspect of engineering and manufacturing, and I particularly enjoyed that. I mean, interestingly, the university, in all of that noise, that really good noise that I was talking about, the university felt a safe place to me. I mean, I hope it's, and I was trying to analyze, and for me it's 30 years ago, to think through how that was done. And I think the sort of the accommodation thing, the linking then to very much a faculty life, but also then lots of activities across the university. I think that probably still all goes on. No reason to believe it doesn't. But I think that for me it was at home quite quickly. And being I felt part of the university, but also the faculty, also part of my accommodation. And I think all of that was really well done.
I think it's still important. We have a lot of increasing amounts of accommodation on campus now, which is to some degree what our students want. But yeah, and the interdisciplinary nature continues. Our engineers work with life sciences, for example, and other parts of the university very much. So that definitely still continues.
That's good.
So what the tricky question, what did you learn that you then went on to use at GKN or Unipart? Because
It,
how did that influence what you
it's
put
a
into practice?
fantastic question, because actually life is one, it's a bit of a cliche, but it is one huge learning experience. And I reflect, for me, persistence and tenacity. At the end of the day, engineering it's a technical subject. Things go wrong, calculations don't work out, and even 30 years ago, computer programs don't run correctly. And so the idea that you work away in the moment, not always with the eye on that final output, was something I undoubtedly learned. It's not always, the book isn't always written, so you need to be able to, in fact, undoubtedly it isn't, and therefore being able to be in the moment, to be working on what you're working, but having an eye on that future. So it's a sort of tenacity, without a doubt. Another aspect for me is to enjoy life. That may to learn about yourself in such a way that you can enjoy things, and I really mean that quite seriously. There are exceptions to this, but for most of us, when we're students, we're worried about ourselves and getting the degree we need, and we're forming new relationships, and we're experiencing new locations, and that's an opportunity to question yourself. How did I behave when I was stressed? How did I respond to this change? How did I deal with a situation that I was uncomfortable with? They ask those questions of yourself, because I think that you don't necessarily have the luxury when later in life to sit back and think about those things. So I really valued that sort of, I guess, purely 3.5 years at the university, and then they sort of extended into 5 years. But to be able to do that during that time, talk to yourself if necessary, talk yourself through what you're learning, because how you behave, how you deal with adversity is much more important than how you deal with success. And I know, in speaking to students, that you all know that. The reason I'm stressing the talk to yourself bit is knowing it is one thing, doing something about it and truly making it real for yourself. Start now, start as a student, because it's probably one of the biggest benefits, I think, to a university education, is to have that time.
I think that's really useful, interesting advice, because I think a lot of emphasis is placed on the academic aspects of university and the things you learn, but your behaviors and your holistic, the soft skills and personal skills are obviously equally important. And well, again, to jump back to something we do, I know in the School of Engineering at the moment, we have sort of engineering project groups, as students do projects, and working together as a team, and seeing the project through and dealing with the difficulties in quite a big project is a big part of our students' time.
Very much so. To be honest,
Um,
Mark, I think it extends into even education before university. We're very, very conscious of that IQ thing,
mm,
and yet, the thing that really makes a difference is the EQ, and
yeah,
I think you can start that process in your academic years too.
yeah. Ken, was that your first job after Liverpool? And then what did you do there, and how did things sort of go on to Unipart?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth talking about. I think one thing. So my sponsoring company, as I say, was British Steel. Actually, subsequently, United Engineering Steels, which was the privatized part of it, the sort of special steels part. And interestingly, they sponsored me through my MSc as well, which meant for the second 6 months I was on a sort of full salary. But I didn't stay with them. I did a project with them. I remember it well, reorganizing an engineering workshop, prototype type workshop, and it was technical. So I advised them, and actually we then implemented some of that. So it was a real life experience as a student. In fact, not dissimilar to things I subsequently did in years soon after. But when I left, I actually wanted to take on albeit at the time would have been a junior management role, and they wouldn't give me that. And so I left and joined GKN. But I think it's something that stayed with me, because I reflected on, for me, it was a huge waste for British industry to not be ready to throw me in at the deep end. And at the time I reflected, the obvious one, was it because I was a woman? And it was still quite unusual to be taking the route I was taking, which was to move as quickly into possible into general management. I actually suspect not. I suspect it was more about the pace of that industry. And so I'm mentioning it because it stayed with me, how we get industry ready graduates, how we educate and make as many real life projects as possible in any degree, but particularly in engineering degrees, is something that I've been quite passionate about. But I then joined GKN, went into a team leader role and was a production manager really very quickly. So they clearly had the confidence that British Steel hadn't had. And actually I was making axles for the Vauxhall Frontera, which is one of the early 4x4s, possibly you and I remember, Mark, but not some of the students.
I do, but some of our students will not.
Yes. And I was, it was a FTSE 100 company, incredibly exciting environment to be in, rapid succession, building a reputation. And I probably would have stayed longer if I hadn't met my husband, who was quite a senior guy at GKN at the time. And I quickly decided there wasn't room for both of us. And so it wasn't, I wanted to make it very much on my own. I thought that was quite important. And so I looked for a new opportunity as soon as that, became a serious, the prospect of Keith becoming my husband needed addressing. And so I left at that point and joined Unipart. I was very attracted by, the breadth of their business and the attention they paid to being at the leading edge of using technology. So yeah, and I've been with them ever since.
So how did you find progression within Unipart? Because obviously you've risen we rose quite rapidly. I understand.
Yeah, I mean, so I joined in '94, and by '97, I'd become managing director of a newly formed joint venture between Unipart and Eberspecher, which was a exhaust engineering and manufacturing business. And so, and that's why I sort of emphasize that aspect of getting in there immediately, because actually progression is there, and it's there to be taken. And so, and I still think that huge experience that I gained during my degree in the sort of real world, as well as studying only in the vacation times, but doing real projects, was so important. So yes, so the first couple of years spending some time in Japan and Germany, so very much learning about the most advanced manufacturing aspects, and then taking that sort of core capability into a general management role, and doing that sort of by age 30, I think was fantastic for me, and really meant, I was experiencing all aspects of business really quickly. And there's absolutely no reason why an engineering graduate from Liverpool can't do that. I guess you'll ask me at some point, what's my biggest advice? And I think that is it, to get yourself in there. It's because I wanted, I was always a great fan of academia. And in fact, my understanding of it, I think has helped my career. The fact that I've been able to form relationships with academic institutions, to understand and to enjoy that, I think is really great. But I was always destined to do, and therefore doing as quickly as possible is the advice that I would give.
At the risk of going off onto a tangent and talking about another university, I understand you're quite involved with and continuing engineering education, and passionate about that.
Yes, and very passionate, because so we formed a joint venture with Coventry University. It is another university, and obviously
other universities are available.
They are indeed.
It's fair.
And actually, I'm speaking at another university later this week with that we have a technology degree with. So I would encourage as much cooperation as possible. But the really one of the achievements I'm most proud of is that relationship, actually, because we formed a part of the engineering faculty on our manufacturing site, on one of our manufacturing sites. So I think that's still fairly unique. I mean, obviously there are lots of relationships between academia and university, and we don't do enough of it in the UK, and enough of it well. And by that I mean the relationship is there, but actually the thinking through into supply chains and job creation, and looking at the arms and legs that can build when it's done really well. So Coventry built a part of its faculty on one of our sites, and in there we have an accredited engineering degree. But also we do R&D. So the much more important point, whether it's Coventry, Liverpool, or anybody else, we do R&D very often funded in such a way that I can do R&D that I otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to do as a sort of medium-sized business. And then ultimately we bring all of those engineers. So we've got undergraduates, graduates, we've got industrial engineers all working in the same environment all of the time. So we do the R&D, and then we lead to contracts, to forming new businesses. So we formed, for instance, Hyperbat, which is our joint venture with Williams Advanced Engineering, started within the Williams Formula One. So forming that new business, that actually started as a research consortium in this facility. So, you know, when I talk about wealth generation and supply chains, they really can start from academic and industrial relationships. And I'm really proud that we sort of see through the fact that academia and industry are in different worlds. You know, that we have different KPIs, we have different structures, different ways of behaving and working. But in the end, there is so much common ground for the benefit of students, the benefit of academic staff, the benefit of industry, and ultimately the benefit of the UK and the globe even, in fact, in some respects. You know, we work together, for instance, towards low carbon technologies. And so it is, and it's Coventry because it's local to our head office. And so it works really well for us. But it is important, again, message really to students to have that bigger picture, to not just be in what you're doing, to actually be thinking, I think, a little bit beyond the core of what you're doing, and thinking about how it fits into the world, whether it's saving the planet or whatever. It's thinking about the broader aspects of life.
That's interesting. I mean, it's something we talk about in our team at the university is, you know, you're transforming lives, but you're transforming, you know, the city and the nation, but you're also transforming the world with what's done at university.
Absolutely.
It's a complete through line. So coming back to Unipart, you're responsible for quite a large team or a division of the business, a very large division of the business. So what's it like being responsible for that and working in such a sort of pressured and high environment?
Well, it is a pressured environment. I mean, it can be, but most of all, it's an enjoyable environment, and it's one of achieving and being successful. And I think that aspect of context is really important. You know, understanding the role of the work you do is important for me personally, but it's important for the people in the business. So we spend a lot of time talking about that bigger picture to all of our employees, whether they're operating a machine or, you know, responsible for strategic thinking. You know, there's a common bond between all the businesses, and I find that is the best way of handling the stress and the pressure of the environment, is to be connected to your people. And again, it's you know, as engineers, we very often think it's the numbers that count, it's the facts that count, and I sort of unashamedly spend quite a lot of time saying this statement. You know, the facts are quite important, but believe it or not, they're not everything. You know, how people are feeling about something, how they feel about being able to make a contribution to the business. Those we loosely call them softer issues, but actually I think they go right to the heart of a successful business. So understanding your people, understanding what motivates them, understanding what's concerning and bothering them, I think is absolutely key to me handling the stress of the day-to-day organization. I mean, I don't, you know, it's important to not be naive about this. I have targets, I have to hit them.
Of course.
But the way you do that leads to, for me, better and different results, but also the journey of getting there. It's important to be happy. Again, how, do engineers, how often do as engineers we talk about those things? It's important to be doing what you want to be doing, to have context for that, and to be working alongside people that you want to be working with. They're the things that I would encourage undergraduates and students to be thinking about. They're much more important than the coding that you need to do, or the engineering solution. Of course that is important, but for me, the having context to it, and understanding the people around you is really important.
Certainly. Would you say people are quite is there a feeling at Unipart? I know I mentioned about the changes in automotive manufacturing and the move towards sort of low carbon and more sustainable solutions. Obviously, that must mean quite a change for people at the business. So are people very much on board? How
But it's a great question, Mark, because I'm spending quite a lot of time thinking about that. And again, strategically, the core business, which was, let's face it, largely internal combustion engine business, and I think probably will be for a little bit longer than people think.
Yes, I think so.
But it's important. That's where our capabilities have been built. That's where our skill set is. It's where our fantastic people, who very often worked with us for very long, for decades, that's where all of that capability sits. So the idea that their history and we move to the future is not, in my view, the right approach. So we very much emphasize the importance of that business being successful to fund the future, and to be an exemplar of how we want to be and how we want to behave and be successful. Then we have our electrification and business, which clearly is the new business, and we move people between those environments. And then we have, you mentioned it, and I knew it would possibly not mean too much to students, sort of deliberately, the ultimate manufacturing partner concept, which is all about taking that 30 or 40 years of first tier automotive. It's a tough industry. You have to get everything you make has to be perfectly correct. You have to be able to do that competitively. All of that knowledge and capability is taking us into low carbon technologies. It's taking us into new sectors. So whether it's construction or utility, they're all we're broadening, we're taking that capability into those new sectors. So actually, my sense, ironically, is that instead of looking back, which I think we've been doing, there's been lots of existential threats. So COVID and the change in technology, and thinking about how we manage and survive that, we've managed to turn the whole organization to thinking about actually how do we design this future, and that is really very empowering. And we're carrying our core capability and our core people with us on that journey. But that hasn't happened over, that requires quite a lot of thought. It's why it's a great example of the task is clearly obvious. The task is to convert all of our ICE business into low carbon technologies, but actually how you do it and how you engage and how you make that happen is actually a much more important and indeed interesting question to be asking.
Thank you. So moving back then a bit towards you personally, what does your day look like as MD at Unipart?
Yeah, that was that's really interesting thinking about, because one tends to just operate. So I always think, so at a sort of global level, I like to sort of split my life into sort of three areas, and spend at least 30% of my time thinking. That may sound strange, but in a fast-paced environment, you're in meetings, it's really important to have time to think, and not always for that to be when you're putting the kids to bed or when you're in the shower. It should be quality time when you think through and prepare for the future. Then I think you know, perhaps the second 30% is people, you know, spending time thinking through how people are going to behave and react. So I'd loosely call it leadership. Of course, all of it requires leadership, but you know, right at the heart of that, I think, is the leadership of people and motivating people to want to be at work and to give their very best. And then I think there's 30% then of actual probably decision making. You know, those meetings, those sessions where you're trying to bring together the information and work through what the best solution. Very few decisions ever made by me. In fact, I always think it's, you know, okay, there's occasionally a need for it, but on the whole, decisions are made by the team. And then the final 10% is that board meeting that I need to go to, the governance, you know, properly making sure that we're doing all the right things, that we're reporting in a responsible way. But that, you know, that 90%, that dealing with people, the strategic thinking, the decision making is where you want to spend. But remember that thinking time. It's the difference between really successful people finding time to think and to work out how you want to do things.
Yeah, I know what you mean about thinking time, and I think it's hard to find. Well, 30% is, if you're managing 30%, that's amazing. I had a conversation with someone.
I don't always achieve it, but it's a good target. It's a good target.
Absolutely. So you've mentioned a bit already around the you know, the working with the Coventry University. Is that your career highlight? Are there any other highlights?
I think it probably is, because it's different. It's making a contribution to creating 40 graduates every year, wherever that, you know, to you know, we can't employ all of those 40 graduates, but actually making them industry ready. You know, all of their projects are done in our own manufacturing site, so preparing them for the world in that way is something I'm really proud of. And then, but they're also creating the environment where we start new businesses. So yeah, I mentioned Hyperbat, but there are, you know, we've got a brand new harness business again in the field of electrification. We've moved into power electronics, all driven around new methods of propulsion. That comes because we've got this special environment of academia and industry and young people and more advanced in terms of PhD. So it's that environment that I'm really proud of. But probably the other is adversity. You know, in manufacturing and in certainly in the automotive sector in the UK, believe me, there have been plenty of moments of adversity, and out of adversity, in my experience, always comes opportunity. And so being able to see the change in ownership of business in the UK, to be working with that and still to be here energized by the new opportunities, is probably a career highlight. It's why I stayed with Unipart as long as I have. It's got quite a high level of employee ownership, so a little bit similar to the John Lewis kind of model, and I enjoy working in that slightly more entrepreneurial environment where we can do things a little bit differently. You know, that, you know, I like to be a little bit different. You know, don't be afraid to be different, and it's so I'm really proud of working with our employees in that way, such that we deliver a different. You know, our model is, if you look at the big global businesses, they've typically got 30 businesses all doing the same thing. There's nothing wrong with that. That in many ways it served, you know, some of the big sectors, but for our business, that's boring. It's nice to be taking what we're doing and thinking about British supply chains that then grow out into the world. And so I've really enjoyed that.
Oh, okay, super. Like, I know I want to pass over because I know we've had a couple of questions, but before I do, if you could give a graduate or student guests any career tips, what would they be?
This is the best bit. For me, the take brave steps. So, you know, I've spent some time during this talking about, you know, being an MD at age 27, being, getting out, walking away from an organization that wouldn't give me the kind of role that I thought I was ready for. Take some brave steps. Don't ever be afraid of pushing yourself as possible, as much as possible. Things, that some of those steps might go wrong. But in my experience, if you're concentrating, and I really genuinely mean this, if you're concentrating on that bigger picture and you're facing adversity and you're dealing with it, and you're learning as you go along, that there's always somebody who spots that. So don't be afraid, and get your boots dirty, get out there, get experience, and it will be hugely valuable. Perhaps linked to that, be the best you can. Again, it's a bit cliche to hear people say it, but it's one of those things that people say. And that, when I was talking about the reflection when you're an undergraduate, think about, it's the doing it that's difficult. Saying it and being the best you can, hey ho, obviously, but actually how you do that when somebody's yelling at you, or when a project's gone wrong, or is about knowing yourself. And that's why I think it's worth exploring. If something's gone wrong, if you do one thing after today, if something's gone wrong, whether it's in your degree or even in your personal life, because for me this is one big life. Think about how you behaved in that situation and whether you could have done it better, and whether there was something, did you go into controlling the situation? Did you go into sticking your head in the sand? All the things that, think about how you are and how you responded, because facing adversity is the best possible advice I can give, and a positive mindset to get you through those adverse moments. And I don't just mean, be happy clappy. That's not what I mean at all. It's about, if I've got this situation in front of me, if you don't take risks, every successful person takes risks. Some of it will go wrong. If somebody's yelling at you, it's probably more about them than it is about you. There's things that I believe in that have carried me through my career, and you need to work out those for yourself. So take brave steps, be the best you can, and have a positive growth mindset in facing adversity.
Thank you. That's really sound advice, I would say. Well, thank you very much, Carol. It's really interesting to speak to you. I will hand over then to Andy, who I think maybe has a question or two for you.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Carol, for sharing such a wonderful career with us. That's been absolutely fascinating to hear your journey, so thank you. We do have quite a few questions from the audience, and I'll get through them as quickly as I can, as I know you have a board meeting to get to. But the first question says, how was it as a woman in engineering? What challenges did you have to overcome?
Yeah, I always welcome this question, because it's less of a problem than you think. There are things to face. Sometimes you do come up against situations where people are unfair, but I have to tell you that for me, business, I always go business. In business, people will look for weaknesses, and that might be because it's perceived that you have a weakness of being a woman, or a weakness of a disability, or a weakness of not being white, male, and middle-aged, or whatever the perception of weakness. And it's rarely the case. So don't even go there. Just think about how to do the job, how to work with the people around you. And very occasionally, on one hand, honestly, I can count the number of times I've come up against somebody who I really think was out to get me because I was a woman. So I think it's much more powerful to think, is this guy out to get me just because he's a competitor, or out to get me just because of the and then to work in that way. So this is a very high level response. The world is still a little bit stacked against ladies. I've had children, and I could talk for a very long time about how you manage that, so tons of detail, but focus on the role, focus on being true to yourself. All those things that I've been talking about are applicable to women, to men, to everybody. And so in my experience, most men are supportive of successful women, I have to say.
Great to hear. Thank you, Carol. Our next question says, have you read any leadership books to help you in your career so far? And if so, which ones would you recommend?
Oh wow, that's a testing question. I'm just looking because I have my latest one here. Just excuse me 1 second. So, and it's actually in book form. So I am currently reading The American Idol, which is the history of the Ford enterprise. And clearly there'll be lists. Read for sure. Read more often on a Kindle than perhaps. But we circulate things like this through the business, so we sort of encourage. It's slightly easier than circulating a Kindle, but it's important to take time. It's that thinking time to learn how other people are doing really well, but it's not, in the end, I also think it needs balancing with your own personal experience, because until you do it, until you're there at the sharp end, at the rock face of it, as well, it's just a book, it's just words. But for now, American Idol by Hoffman is my top of the list at the moment.
That's great. I love that you had it to hand as well. That's great. Thank you. The next question is, what's the best piece of advice that you've been given in your career?
I think I probably covered it, to be honest, in the sense that be true to yourself. Be true to yourself. There is no book that's written for Carol Rose Burke or for John Smith, who might be on the call today. There is no book, so you have to work things through for yourself, and don't be too serious about it, because actually life should be fun. But actually spending some time understanding yourself, applying you to a situation is honestly the best advice I've ever received. And a little context of that, I think I might have touched on it earlier, is this, it's not always about, when somebody's attacking you, or and I shouldn't suggest that happens too often, but if you're in a tough situation and somebody's perhaps criticizing you, it's very often less about you than it is about the person that's criticizing you. Just get that context in your life. And when somebody said that to me, I thought, let me try and see the world through that guy's eyes. And yeah, it's probably him that's more upset than I am. And this is so it's a bit of a big soft issue, but nevertheless, I think probably single biggest piece of advice I've ever received.
That's great, thank you. Just a couple more questions if we have time, Carol. I know you need to leave us, but thank you, Carol, for a very interesting talk. So, Stephen, who do you admire as a leader?
The list is huge. The list is huge. And so I'd rather not pick somebody. But mainly because the best leaders that are around us are in our everyday lives. Okay, we tend, political world is a disaster, isn't it? And so you could turn to, some business leaders or people who are, on the perhaps the periphery of the core business world. But actually, the best leaders that I work with are people I meet in every day who have to turn an adversity into success. And so I'm deliberately not answering the question, because I think it detracts from the what I want you to go away with, which is leadership is about every day working with the people around you, facing adversity and coming up with new solutions. And that's not about a name in a newspaper or on your telephone or whatever. It is about day-to-day life.
Well, thank you, Carol. And one last question, if we may, and answer it really quickly, if you don't mind. It's from Bernard, and he says, "How are you handling engineering management with latest innovation in artificial intelligence?"
Oh, that's not a quick answer, but just very, it's a great question, and it's very much at the heart of our thinking at the moment, because we've got, the big shift in, we all talk about the shift in from internal combustion engine to electrification and other forms of propulsion, because the other big shift is digital. And I think AI will have a phenomenal impact on industry. But before you move, for me, AI can only come when you have really good data. And so I think if I try and speak for industry here in the UK, we're at the point, I think, where we need to be collecting that data. So over the last 10 years, we've been future-proofing, if you like, our processes. We've been putting sensors on, and we've been having a traceability of data in all our processes, not knowing at all how we're going to use that data. And I've even had incidences where I've had quality issues. The data has been there that could have prevented that quality issue if it was intelligent, but it's just sitting there because there's too much of it, or I can't access it. So so we've got the sort of technology change, and then we've got the data. So for me, it's much more about data management, of which AI should lead to us being able to use the data we've got around us to then predict and respond, faster and better than humans can. So it's actually not that complicated, the sort of strategic intent of business. So we are currently developing our ability to collect data and then to use that data. And I think the next step then will be, by understanding it, using it through an AI process. So that's a very real world answer to the question. It's right at the heart of what we're thinking about, but it's probably not Chat GPT. In my mind, that's somebody else's data that's out of date. It's got huge use, but in industry, it needs to be my data being used to control my machines in a sort of predictive way. So it's really, really exciting and a fantastic opportunity.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Carol. I'm sorry I picked such a tricky question to end on, and we could probably talk about it all day, couldn't we? We have run over a little bit of time there, Carol, so apologies for that, but I think you can see all the interesting questions that have come in there. Apologies, we've not had a chance to get through them all, but we do have a number of future events coming up as well to look out for. Just a massive thank you to yourself, Carol, for giving up your time. I know how busy you are, and we really appreciate you taking the time to reflect on your fabulous career so far. It's been absolutely wonderful to hear about, and thank you for answering all of our wonderful questions so honestly as well. We've really enjoyed today's session, and so yeah, just a final thank you to you, Carol, and to Mark for presenting as well, and a thank you to everyone for attending in the audience as well, wherever you are in the world. We do have some more events coming up in March and April, so please keep an eye out on your emails for those invites that'll be coming out shortly. But thank you for joining us, and a big thank you to Carol again for your time.
Thank you,
Carol.
good luck, everybody. Yeah, good luck.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.